The air smelled of disinfectant and decay, a mix so sharp it could slice through the back of your throat. The hospital had been sealed off for weeks, every exit welded shut, every window covered, every hallway barricaded. We thought locking it down would keep the world safe. We thought the thing inside couldn't escape. But hospitals are made for breathing things, for corridors, vents, hidden crawl spaces. And some things don't stay caged for long. I should have walked away that night, ignored the buzzing pager, the emergency summons, the desperate voice on the other end of the line. But I didn't. I went back to that hospital. I went back because I thought I could help. Instead, I became a witness to the night it woke up. The night it got out. The first time I returned, the place was almost unrecognizable. Sheets of metal sealed the front doors, spray-painted in red, "Keep out, contaminated." The city had abandoned it after the outbreak, after the patients started vanishing instead of dying. But the lock was already undone, the steel edges pried back as though something had clawed its way out from within. Inside, the lights flickered in long, stuttering patterns. Some glowed too bright, others hummed like insects. My boots echoed on tile floors streaked with old blood that hadn't fully dried, cracks in it like veins across the corridors. The smell hit me first, antiseptic mixed with rot, but deeper, almost sweet, like fruit left too long in the sun. I wasn't alone. Dr. Holbrook was waiting near the nurses' station, the last physician still haunting these halls. His lab coat was torn at the hem, his face gray with exhaustion. He didn't greet me with relief, only with a shaking whisper. "They told you to stay away. You shouldn't be here." But I was already there. Already too deep. He led me down to the ICU, where the doors had been chained shut from the outside. The glass panes were smeared, fingerprints dragged in spirals, like something had tried to push its way through. On the walls were words scrawled in red marker, or maybe blood. They read, "We are not patients anymore." The story unraveled slowly, between his halting words and the echoes of movement behind every corner. The lockdown had been government-mandated, but not for quarantine. It wasn't a virus, not really. It had started with a single patient, room 309, a man with no name and no history. He was found wandering the ER one night, drenched in blood that wasn't his own. He never spoke, never blinked, never ate. They strapped him down, kept him under sedation. But sedation didn't hold. "Something spread," Holbrook said, trembling. "Not an infection. Not a disease. A presence." People who went near him changed. First their eyes went dark. Then their voices echoed with two tones. And then they weren't them anymore. The hospital staff had tried to contain it. One by one, they failed. I could feel it as we walked deeper, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the thing's breath. Hallways groaned. Vents rattled. Somewhere above us, a slow dragging sound moved along the ceiling, like bare limbs scraping steel. Then we heard the first scream. It came from the pediatric wing, a sound so sharp it split the silence in half. Holbrook flinched, gripping my arm, but we followed anyway. The doors swung open to reveal tiny beds overturned, toys scattered, crayon drawings smeared into grotesque shapes. The scream came again, closer. A nurse staggered out from the shadows, her scrubs shredded, her skin pale as wax. She reached for us, but her fingers bent wrong, joints folding backward like broken hinges. Her mouth opened. The voice that came out wasn't hers. It was layered, thick, the sound of something speaking through her. "You shouldn't have come back." Holbrook pulled me away just as her body convulsed and collapsed into a heap, limbs twitching, jaw still moving long after her eyes had gone still. We didn't stop running until we reached the stairwell. The hospital was alive. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. Lights blinked in patterns too deliberate to be random. Somewhere below us, doors slammed shut on their own. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that the thing from room 309 wasn't confined anymore. It had found the vents, the walls, the very bones of the building. We descended into the basement, where Holbrook said the lockdown had truly begun. Heavy steel doors lined the walls, each welded shut. On them, etched deep into the metal, were claw marks. Behind one door came a slow scratching, rhythmic, like something writing on the inside. I pressed my ear closer despite myself, and heard whispers. Hundreds of them. All speaking my name. Holbrook pulled me back. His face was pale, sweat glistening on his temples. "They don't forget," he muttered. "Once it knows you, it doesn't let go." We should have left then, but we didn't. The power surged, plunging the hallway into blackness. When the lights flickered back, the doors weren't shut anymore. Every one of them stood ajar, metal peeled back like paper. The scratching stopped. The whispers didn't. They were loose. What spilled into the hallway wasn't human anymore. Some wore hospital gowns, some still had ID tags swinging from their necks, but their faces had changed, stretching, splitting, eyes black as tar. They moved wrong, too fast, too jagged, as if gravity meant nothing. Holbrook froze. I grabbed him, dragging him into the nearest supply closet. We barred the door, listening as the things rushed past, their nails clicking against the tile. In the suffocating dark, Holbrook whispered what I didn't want to hear. We locked it down to protect the outside. But the lockdown failed. They're looking for a way out. And now that you're here, it knows you too. His words sank in like ice. This wasn't about the hospital anymore. The walls, the doors, the chains, they weren't enough. The presence had learned to spread, to use voices, to bend bodies, to crawl through the smallest cracks. And if it got out, the city wouldn't stand a chance. When we finally slipped out of the hospital through the emergency exit, the night air felt like salvation. But it was too quiet. No sirens. No traffic. No sound of life at all. The city beyond the gates lay in silence, streetlights buzzing over empty roads. That's when I saw the footprints. Dozens of them. Fresh, wet, leading away from the hospital and into the streets. The lockdown hadn't worked. The thing inside was already free. And the silence of the city told me one thing: we were already too late. The night outside the hospital should have been a relief, but it wasn't. The silence was wrong. Cities don't sleep in complete quiet, not even in the darkest hours before dawn. There should have been the hum of traffic, the distant wail of sirens, a dog barking in some alley. Instead, there was nothing but the buzz of flickering street lamps, each light haloed in mist that hadn't been there minutes before. My chest tightened with the realization that whatever had been confined inside the hospital walls was no longer trapped. It had already seeped into the veins of the city, spreading like smoke in the wind. Holbrook clung to the straps of his torn lab coat as if it were the only thing holding him upright. His eyes darted left and right, trying to convince himself that we weren't alone. The footprints trailed ahead of us, wet, smeared, impossibly fresh. They were bare, elongated, with toes that curved too far inward, pressed into the asphalt as though the ground had softened for them. The trail split at an intersection, some sets of prints turning north, others west, vanishing into shadow. That was the moment it hit me. There wasn't just one anymore. The hospital hadn't unleashed a singular monster. It had birthed many. We kept walking, not because we thought it was safe, but because standing still felt like inviting something unseen to take us. Every street we passed looked abandoned mid-breath. Cars sat with their doors flung open, headlights still glowing, radios whispering static. A stroller lay tipped on its side near the curb, its tiny wheels spinning lazily in the night breeze. No child inside. No parent nearby. The city hadn't just been left behind, it had been emptied. Drained. At the corner of 5th and Mayfield, we heard the first sound since leaving the hospital. A whisper, faint, as though carried on wires. It came from the traffic light overhead. The bulb flickered from green to red, then dimmed, and through the electric hum came words, "I know you. I know you." The voice wasn't mechanical, it was the same layered tone I had heard from the nurse back in the pediatric wing, a voice stretched across more than one throat. Holbrook grabbed my sleeve, pulling me forward, but the light above us buzzed louder, and all at once the whispers spread across the street lamps in every direction, each one chanting our names. We ran. The farther we went, the clearer it became that escape wasn't possible. Shadows moved in ways they shouldn't. Street corners bent into angles that didn't exist. Twice, I swear we ran down different streets only to find ourselves back at the same intersection, the same tipped stroller, the same footprints in the pavement. The city had become a labyrinth, stitched together by whatever force had escaped confinement. And somewhere in that maze, it hunted us. We ducked into a convenience store, its door hanging open, bell chiming faintly as it moved in the wind. The shelves were knocked over, glass bottles shattered across the floor. A sticky sweetness clung to the air. My flashlight beam skimmed across the counter where the register had been ripped open, money scattered like dead leaves. Behind the counter, scrawled across the wall in thick, uneven lines, were the words, "We see through glass." Holbrook muttered something about reflections, about how they could use anything shiny to find us. I wanted to dismiss it, but then I caught it, movement in the cracked mirror near the restroom door. At first it was just a flicker, like someone passing by out of sight, but then the reflection didn't match the room. In the mirror, the shelves weren't toppled. The floor was clean. And a dozen figures stood in the aisles, frozen in place, their faces obscured by shadow. They turned their heads in unison toward me. The glass spidered into fractures before I even realized I had thrown a can at it. Holbrook yanked me away, hissing that we couldn't linger. As we pushed back out into the night, I could still feel those eyes on me, lingering even without the mirror to contain them. We followed the footprints deeper into the heart of the city. Eventually, they led us to the subway entrance. Its gates, once chained shut, now dangled in pieces as if something had torn them apart from below. The air that wafted out was hot, damp, and carried the smell of rot and iron. Against every shred of instinct in my body, we descended, our footsteps echoing down the concrete stairs. The tunnels were worse. Much worse. Graffiti that once shouted names and curses had been overwritten by jagged symbols that hurt to look at, curling lines that bent away from my vision even as I stared at them. Pools of water rippled with no source. And from deeper within the tunnels came a sound, a chorus of breathing, all in sync, as though hundreds of lungs drew in air together. Holbrook pressed his back to the wall, whispering, "This is where it nests now. It doesn't need the hospital anymore. The whole city is its ward." Something shifted in the dark, just ahead. Not footsteps, not the rustle of fabric, but the scrape of something dragging its weight across stone. My light flickered over the tracks, and for a split second, I saw it. A figure crawling on all fours, its joints bending backwards, its face hidden by long black hair. But what froze my blood wasn't its shape, it was the dozen other faces pushing out of its back, stretched like wax, their mouths opening and closing in silent screams. We didn't wait. We ran into the tunnels, deeper than I'd ever dared go. The sound of pursuit followed, hands slapping concrete, voices overlapping in a grotesque harmony. At times it sounded close, at times far away, but always there, always just behind us. My lungs burned, and Holbrook stumbled, clutching his side. That was when we reached the old maintenance chamber. A heavy steel door hung open, its lock snapped like brittle bone. Inside was a control panel, dusty and half-broken, wires hanging loose. Holbrook fell against it, his face pale, lips trembling. "We can shut down the power," he said. "If we kill the grid, we might starve it. It feeds on light, on circuits, on the pulse of the city." I wanted to believe him, but even as he spoke, the chamber lights flickered and dimmed, then blazed back to life with a sickly green glow. The walls themselves seemed to ripple, bulging outward as though something pressed from the other side. And in the static of the intercom above us, the voice came again. "You locked me in once. You will not lock me again." Holbrook's shaking hand hovered over the switch. I could see the madness blooming in his eyes, the weight of weeks spent inside those cursed walls. Maybe he was right. Maybe shutting the city's heart would slow it. But maybe it was already too late. I didn't know what terrified me more, the idea of leaving the power running, or of plunging the city into darkness where we'd never see it coming. Before I could answer, the chamber door slammed shut. Something had found us. And from the vents above, the breathing grew louder. The chamber door shuddered as something scraped along the outside, metal bending under the weight of whatever leaned against it. Holbrook's breath came in short bursts, his trembling fingers hovering over the switch that could shut the power down for the whole grid. I pressed my back to the wall, staring at the vents above, where the sound of synchronized breathing grew so heavy it rattled dust from the ceiling. My mind spun. If the hospital had been its cocoon, then the city had become its body. Every wire, every bulb, every circuit was a vein it now pulsed through. Holbrook whispered, "If I pull this, it might starve. Just long enough to stop it. Just long enough for us to escape." His words were desperate, but his eyes were hollow, sunk deep in a face that looked decades older than when I first met him. I could feel that he didn't even believe what he was saying. Maybe it was hope, maybe madness, but it was all we had. The lights above flickered, then dimmed, and through the dying glow I saw it, the shadow pressed against the other side of the door. It wasn't one body but many, writhing and twisting together, arms sprouting at wrong angles, faces half-formed, mouths yawning wide without sound. They shifted like liquid, the shape of the hospital's lost patient stitched into something larger, something that couldn't be named. The steel groaned, the hinges shrieked, and Holbrook screamed as he slammed his palm onto the switch. The world went black. For a moment, the silence was so total it deafened me. My ears rang with absence, my vision drowned in pitch. I couldn't even see my own hands. Then came the sound, hundreds of voices erupting at once, shrieking, howling, not from the vents anymore but from the walls, from the very stone beneath our feet. Something had been ripped from its feeding vein, and now it was starving. Holbrook stumbled in the dark, his hands clawing at me. "We have to move before it adapts." His voice cracked into something close to a sob. I grabbed his sleeve, feeling my way toward the faintest draft of air that hinted at another passage. We stumbled through pitch, our feet slapping water that seemed to come from nowhere. Behind us, the chamber split with a thunderous crack, and the thing poured through, its mass dragging, stretching, slamming into walls that groaned under its weight. We ran blind, every step threatening to pitch us into unseen pits. Somewhere in the dark, I thought I heard trains moving, their horns distant, though the subway hadn't run in years. The sound didn't fade. It grew closer. The tunnel shook, stones crumbling from the ceiling as if something massive rolled just beneath the surface. Holbrook screamed again, not in fear but in agony, and when I turned, I saw why. His shadow wasn't his anymore. In the flicker of the failing emergency lights, his silhouette stretched longer, thinner, hands multiplying, heads branching. He fell to his knees, his skin rippling, bones snapping in soft bursts beneath it. "Don't let it take me," he begged. His voice overlapped, a second tone clawing its way through his throat. For a heartbeat, I thought about ending it for him, finding some jagged piece of steel or rock, sparing him what was coming. But before I could move, the shadows swallowed him whole. His body jerked once, then straightened unnaturally, and when he lifted his head, it wasn't Holbrook anymore. His eyes were pits of oil, his mouth a cavern that split wider than human flesh should allow. I turned and ran. The tunnels twisted in ways I couldn't understand. Left bled into right, staircases doubled back into themselves. More than once, I found myself where I had started, as though the city itself had curled inward to keep me inside. The breathing never left. It followed in waves, sometimes behind me, sometimes above, sometimes directly in front of where I was heading. I began to wonder if I was chasing my own death, each corridor a vein drawing me closer to the heart of the thing. When I finally burst through into open air, it was not the surface I found. It was a cavern, vast and hollow, carved out beneath the city like some forgotten wound. In the center of it lay the remains of the hospital itself, or at least a version of it. The building rose from the earth like a tumor, walls pulsing, windows staring like eyes. I could see faces pressing against the glass, mouths open in silent screams. Some were the staff I remembered. Some were children. Some were strangers. All were part of it now. The cavern trembled with its breath. I pressed myself against the rocks, trying not to move, trying not to be seen, but its gaze was everywhere. The glass eyes turned, and I felt it focus on me. Not just one face, not just one voice, but all of them together, a chorus that filled the cavern without sound. The air thickened, hot and heavy, until every breath scraped my throat raw. My vision swam. My knees buckled. And then, from behind me, a hand gripped my shoulder. I spun, ready to fight, but froze. It was a woman, ragged, clothes torn to ribbons, her eyes bloodshot but human. She pressed a finger to her lips, urging silence, and pulled me into a fissure in the cavern wall. Inside the narrow gap, a handful of others huddled, faces pale, eyes wide with the same terror I felt. "Survivors," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible over the rumble outside. "You're not the only one who made it out. But it knows us. It always knows." Her hands shook as she pointed to a bundle in the corner. Maps, journals, scraps of scavenged food. "We've been trying to find a way out for days. But the deeper we go, the more it bends. The city isn't a city anymore. It's a maze made from its mind. One of the others, an older man with a crooked nose, added, "You can't kill it. You can't starve it. You can only keep moving, because if you stop, it pulls you into itself." Their words sank into me like poison. I thought of Holbrook, of his transformation, of his hollow plea. I thought of the faces in the hospital's glass eyes. The survivors weren't free, they were just running slower. The ground shook again, dust raining from the fissure ceiling. The walls pulsed with light, veins of red and black spreading across the stone like roots. The thing was searching, pressing closer. I realized then that hiding wasn't survival. Hiding only gave it more time. And in the suffocating dark of that fissure, one thought burrowed into me, louder than all the whispers, louder than the screams, louder than the breath of the thing that had escaped. If the hospital had been its beginning, and the city was its body, then where was its heart? The survivors barely spoke after that, their silence thick with the weight of knowing what hunted us. The fissure walls trembled, thin lines of dust trailing down as though the thing outside was listening, pressing its mass against the stone to feel the vibration of our heartbeats. I kept my breath shallow, chest burning with the effort not to gasp. The woman beside me, the one who had pulled me to safety, leaned close and whispered, "It always finds us when we stay too long." Her words weren't a warning, they were a promise. The older man with the crooked nose shuffled forward, holding one of the crude maps they had drawn on torn scraps of cardboard. By candlelight, the lines looked more like scars than streets, jagged pathways scribbled in frustration. "There's a way down," he said, voice hoarse. "We think it leads to its center. The deeper we go, the more it pulls. That's where it hides its core." His hands trembled as he unfolded another scrap. "If it has a heart, it's there. If it doesn't, then at least we'll know." I didn't know whether to believe him. But doing nothing wasn't survival, it was waiting. Waiting to be swallowed whole. So we followed. The fissure opened into a tunnel that descended like a throat. The deeper we went, the more the air thickened, cloying and hot, carrying a copper tang that coated the back of my tongue. The walls weren't stone anymore, but something softer, like concrete wrapped in flesh. My hands brushed against surfaces that pulsed faintly, and every step echoed as though we walked inside a vast, hollow body. The woman carried a candle, its flame twitching violently though there was no wind. Shadows writhed against the walls, sometimes ahead of us, sometimes behind. More than once, I saw them move against the flame's direction, as though they were alive, detached from our bodies. Each time they twitched closer, the survivors hissed for silence, eyes wide, until the shadows retreated again. Hours, or maybe only minutes, bled together before we reached it, a cavern so large the candlelight couldn't touch its edges. In the center rose a pillar of pulsing matter, stitched from debris of the city itself, steel beams, bricks, glass, and bones fused into one obscene tower. It beat like a heart, each throb rattling the cavern floor, sending ripples through the air. Faces pushed against its surface, emerging then melting back, mouths opening in soundless screams. I recognized some of them. Patients. Nurses. Even Holbrook. The woman gripped my wrist until her nails cut into my skin. "That's it. That's where it lives." Her voice shook, but there was a sharp edge to it. "If we destroy this, maybe the city can breathe again." But how? None of us had weapons strong enough, and the tower was alive, writhing with every pulse. The older man pulled something from his pack, a bundle of explosives, wires tangled around them. He explained in hurried whispers that he had scavenged them from a construction site. "It won't kill it," he said, "but maybe it'll collapse this chamber. Trap it again." His voice faltered on that last word, because we all knew the truth. The hospital had been a trap once, and it hadn't held. Still, we helped him set the charges, hands trembling as we pressed the explosives into the folds of that grotesque tower. Every second stretched taut, because with each pulse, I felt it becoming aware of us. The faces in its surface turned, one by one, their mouths twitching into grotesque smiles. The ground shook harder. The air grew hotter. And then the whisper came. Not from the walls, not from the vents, not from the broken machines it once haunted, but from inside my head. "You are mine already." I staggered, clutching my skull, but the voice didn't stop. It poured through my veins, spoke with my own memories, twisting them, pulling images of people I loved, people I'd buried, and stretching their faces across its many mouths. Every survivor screamed then, all clutching their heads, writhing as the tower's rhythm grew faster, harder, until the cavern itself seemed to pulse. The older man lit the fuse. Time warped into fragments. The woman dragging me toward the tunnel, screaming words I couldn't understand over the thunder in my skull. The others scattering, shadows rising from the floor to claw them back. The tower splitting open, revealing an interior that writhed with 1,000 limbs reaching for us. The blast of light as the fuse met powder. Then came the explosion. Stone split. Fire roared. The cavern shook as though the entire city had been dropped into an abyss. I remember falling, rocks slamming into my body, the heat licking at my skin. I remember the woman's hand slipping from mine, her scream vanishing into the collapse. And then, blackness. When I woke, I was outside. Not on the streets, not in the hospital, but somewhere else. The city was silent. The sky above was gray, no sun, no stars, only a haze that blurred the horizon. Buildings stood like empty shells, windows dark, streets cracked. At first, I thought I had died, that this was some purgatory. But then I saw movement. Faces in the glass. Every building reflected not the street, but them. The patients. The nurses. Holbrook. The woman. Their faces pressed against every surface, mouths moving in unison. I pressed my hands against my ears, but I still heard it, voices layering into one, stretching across the silence of the city. You locked us down. You tried to bury us. But we are the city now. The glass rippled like water, and for a moment I saw my own reflection shift, my eyes blackening, my mouth splitting too wide. I ran, though I didn't know where to go. Every corner turned back on itself. Every street carried me in circles. The silence was complete, except for the echo of their voices inside me. The survivors hadn't survived. None of us had. The blast hadn't killed it, it had freed it fully. And as I stumbled into the center of the empty street, I understood the truth that froze my blood more than anything else. The hospital hadn't contained it. The city hadn't contained it. There was no wall, no door, no chain strong enough to hold it. Because it wasn't just inside the building. It wasn't just inside the wires. It was inside us. I don't know how much longer I have before it takes me completely. My shadow already moves when I don't. My reflection already smiles when I don't. Maybe soon, I'll join them in the glass, another face stretched wide in that endless chorus. And when it spreads beyond the city, when it crawls across the world the way it crawled through those vents and wires, there will be no stopping it. We locked down the hospital. We tried to bury what we couldn't understand. But something inside got out. And it's never going back.